felt that there was a gap in how this knowledge building was getting translated into classroom teaching strategies. So that's how the idea of this series was born. And we want the focus also to be on classroom teaching resources and strategies. So let me quickly take you through the structure of the series. In the first session today, that's called Teaching Climate Resilience, we'll address the crucial issue of climate action and how to foster a deeper understanding of climate change among our students. We'll be discussing resources, strategies, and obviously some theoretical aspects of the concept as well. However, I'll come back to this in a bit. The second session in the series, which will be in July 2024, is called Building Sustainable Campuses and Institutions. In this session, we'll talk about the concept of a green campus, as well as possible case studies and fieldwork ideas that could tie with this theme. So if you've gone through the latest UGC syllabus, you would have seen that fieldwork and case studies form a very crucial aspect of the syllabus, the assessment as well. So we would be addressing that. And finally, in the third session of the series, which is called SDGs, a teaching guide, that will be held in August. We all know a little something about SDGs, how they are an overarching framework for guiding sustainable and equitable development. Basics, we're all clear about. Our session will help you gain insights on India's performance on the different SDGs and how that could be integrated into your classroom teaching to make your students aware about ground realities. We really hope that these discussions, this series is beneficial for your classroom teaching as well as for your own knowledge building, and they add to your professional career. We are receiving a lot of queries about participation certificates. So let me clarify that first of all. We will be giving out participation certificates to all the Gen members who attend all 3 sessions. So the basic requirement to get the certificate for these sessions is to attend all 3 sessions in the series and to be present in the meeting throughout the duration of the meeting. So that is why I requested everybody to please ensure that your correct name is displayed. I can see a few iPhone and numbers displayed as usernames. So if you could rename yourself as your full name, we would be able to identify who all are present in the meeting, and we would be give out the certificates accordingly. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me introduce you to this Green Educators Network, or GEN as we call it. It is a community of college educators like you who are teaching environment studies or related courses in universities across the country. The basic common thread that all of us at GEN share is the desire to nurture the skills and knowledge in students so that they can contribute to sustainable and equitable development. We organize a variety of events for our network members. This series is one of those events. We have conclaves, we have book launches, we have special skill building sessions. So many of you have already registered to be a GEN member. If you've not registered, however, you can do so by filling out a very simple form. We'll post the link to fill out the form in the chat box. You can fill it out at your convenience. As a GEN member, you can also contribute to our monthly newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter to all our members. And as a member, you are entitled to contribute an article to the newsletter if you want. And we'll share the link for the article as well. For the newsletter as well in the chat box. You can subscribe to the newsletter. So this is about GEN. This is about today, the session series. And I would request you to stay with us till the end because we have a very special announcement for GEN members. I'll give the details at the end. Coming to today's session. For the first session of this series, the Educator's Guide to Environmental Studies, we have chosen one of the core themes that's addressed in the latest UGC curriculum. That's climate change. We have discussed the science behind climate change, its undeniable impact on our planet, the extreme weather events it's causing on multiple occasions. I think it is safe to say that we, as a community of educators, are convinced that climate change education has a crucial role to play in equipping our younger generations with the necessary skills, knowledge, and resilience needed to respond and adapt to this crisis. So, in today's session, we have with us CSE expert Tushant Dev, who is a part of the climate change team at CSE. Hi, Tushant.
Hi, Sakshi. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so let me introduce the speaker to you, the speaker of the day to you, and then we can get started with the session. Trishant's primary research areas include carbon markets, climate-based trade policies, mitigation and energy transition policies, and global climate politics, including the UNFCCC negotiation process. He also has experience working on adaptation initiatives in forestry and agriculture sectors, as well as research in ecosystem restoration and conservation related issues. In his session today, he will not only take us through the theoretical aspects of climate action, but also share pedagogic strategies, teaching resources, activity ideas, and more. Because these are very complex ideas: climate action, climate mitigation, climate adaptation. So, how can you take these complex ideas to your classroom with ease is something that Trishant will be unpacking today. And of course, we will welcome inputs from our community members today here at various points. So, at any point, if you want to share something with us, you can either put it in the chat box. There are specific slots where we will be asking you to unmute yourself and share your views. However, we will request you to limit your responses to a minute or so that we can, complete the session in time. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Tushant so we can begin this session. Over to you, Tushant.
Thank you, Sakshi. Let me share my screen first. I think
Yes, it's visible.
it's visible, right?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trishant Dev, and I work in the climate change program here at the Center for Science and Environment. We will be talking about teaching climate resilience. And I have prepared these presentation based on the UGC curriculum for the same. And it's not so much about the subject itself, but about what possible approaches can be taken in teaching the subject. To begin with, I would like to ask this question to you first. Please, do you currently teach climate change in your classroom? What are the themes that you cover? If anyone can share, please keep the answers limited to less than a minute because we have a lot of ground to cover. So if anybody wants to answer that.
If anybody would like to respond, kindly unmute yourself and please go ahead with the response. Jayati ma'am is saying that she takes up SDGs. Amita ma'am takes up global warming.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Often we end up teaching students what are the causes of climate change, what is anthropogenic, and what is the man-made changes, then greenhouse gases, as well as the other gases which are responsible for contributing to climate change. What are the various initiatives that have been taken globally as well as in India when it comes to mitigating climate change, and also the impacts of climate change. There are some of the things which are often taught in our courses.
Thank you, ma'am. That is helpful. Yeah, so pretty much that was useful, and we'll make a note of this. And hopefully, we are also making a note of this whole approach that ma'am shared with us. First of all, it is important to understand that the climate change issue is not just about a moral or a political correctness. There are real questions to be answered, technical ones, political ones, ethical ones, and it is very important to establish right at the outset the science behind climate change and establishing that, yes, there is a climate change. I think for the students to get this cleared very much in the beginning, that there is a problem around them and it's not just something that is being discussed somewhere and they are not able to see. They should be able to relate to it. And that is why the first thing that comes to our head is heat waves, the heat that we are, that we recently had to endure. So this is a graph that I had taken from a website that analyzes temperature data. This is about sea surface temperature, and the orange line indicates the temperature variation of sea surface in 2023 and the black line of 2024. For the first time in 469 days, on 25th June, that is day before yesterday, the global sea surface temperature was not a new record for the day. So I think these kinds of graphs that give a visual dimension to the points that we are making, the stark realities, graph-based data, that is very crucial to start with because that creates a sense of urgency, that creates a sense of that something is happening around us. So I think starting with these kinds of data sets is important that establish the science of climate change. This is the similar graph that indicates the land temperature. You can see the 2023 line orange clearly is offset. And then, well, these changes are taking place. The students would also like to know, well, these changes were also taking place before. What is different now? And how can we say that climate change is responsible for that? So an important factor to introduce to them is what is called as attribution science, that attributes these extreme weather events or temperature rises to climate change. We have a body called as World Weather Attribution Network that does some academic research on this and attributes the weather events to climate change. And so this is kind of a thing that provides the evidence to students that yes, some of these changes are taking place because of climate change. In fact, in 2023, the heat waves that that took the basically attributed to climate change by the World Weather Attribution Network. In fact, for 2022 as well, I think that will be more likely the case for 2024 as well. So establishing science, establishing a source of urgency, and that too with data graphics becomes important at the beginning of when you start a course like this. These are some of the resources that I'm sharing. I'm sure some of the resources that you may know, some of them you may not know. Uh, Climate data, the first resource talks about different, it will give you graphical representation of different kinds of temperature changes or atmospheric different parametric changes. Then there's the world weather attribution, of course. Then I've also shared a report of CSE India 2023. It's a down-to-earth report that illustrates the changing weather within India. So it provides a local context of climate change. And it's very visually appealing. So it's a good way to start teaching about the impacts of climate change itself. And talking about the climate change impacts, even slight temperature changes in the atmosphere, the surface temperature of land or sea that we are seeing impacts the climate to a large extent. And this graphic on the screen is from the IPCC sixth assessment cycle. And I like to use graphics that are simpler. This one is a rather more busier graphic. But a lot of information has been put in here. Simpler graphs that give out more information are helpful for students to digest these topics rather than bland presentations on these are the bullet points on the impacts of climate change. Some of these impacts from the sixth assessment cycle of IPCC Working Group 1 listed here. And I always go back to IPCC's synthesis report because it is the authoritative science of the time, and it can't be stressed enough that uh, no amount of doubt that is placed on uh, these kinds of weather events or the impacts of these events. These can be dealt with from the report itself. There's so much in the report itself that deals with these issues, and these scientists are authoritative heads in these topics. So I always like to go back to the IPCC report, and I highly recommend teachers as well as students to use the IPCC report. It can be a bit complex at times, comes up with. So using them is important. These are some more impacts: the urban environment, air quality, some secondary impacts. How does it impact the oceans, the glaciers? IPCC had some special reports on land, a special report on cryosphere and snows that it had put out a few years ago. So in each of the area, there are reports that talk about the the impacts of climate change, and they are useful to refer to. So the result is very much what we see in terms of extreme weather events. This is something that is visible to all, experienced by all, and this is a good starting point for us to teach the impact of climate change to students. This is a dashboard. On your screen, there's a dashboard from Down to Earth, which says that for the first 90 days of 2024, 72 days had some or the other kind of extreme weather disaster in India. So they've given a slogan for this: a disaster a day. So that is really happening in India, and people are experiencing that. So there are a few elements of news clips in this slide as well. So I like to use them to tell people that it's a part of our everyday news that we are encountering. It's not something that we read about only in something happened at COP, something was discussed at COP, or IPCC said something. It's something that we are experiencing on our own. So we need to pull out stories from the internet, discuss them in classrooms, and these stories should be those that are closer to the experience of the students. There should be interactive sessions where students could contribute to some of the news that they have read or heard, and it's very much possible that every day some student will be reading something which is surprising, something which will catch the interest of the class. So a small session to discuss such news would be helpful for classrooms and engaging as well. But above all, I think the strongest way to communicate the impacts issue is through visuals and stories. Best, they are told in short videos and documentaries. So if possible, showing short documentaries can be showcased in classrooms. This could be a good way to share the impacts. Here I have given examples of how Down to Earth puts out short videos on the impacts, very current impacts of climate change, and there are some other videos as well. So it's very helpful to use these videos, short videos, to explain to students what is going on in the world. Now, I would like to understand this from you. Does anybody has any thoughts to share? How would you prefer to communicate the impacts of climate change to your classroom? Happy to listen to you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, because of this recent, heat surge that all of us experienced in 2024 itself, so what we used to do was these days on mobile apps. On mobile there are various apps, and also the air quality, all of the data is available. So immediately I would start the class with having everybody check this data set, and then look at the climate, the air quality, and also what they are experiencing as impact of that air quality. Is there any change in their breathing? Is there any change in their heaviness, or any other health effects that they are observing in and around them? So that actually personalizing these impacts sets the tone for further, diving deeper into the sustainable development goals that we are actually trying to take up one by one in the class. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, ma'am, thank you. That's actually very useful. The point that you're making, personalizing the experience, and I like that idea very much of sharing the app of the air quality index with students. Yeah, that's a great idea. Anybody else would like to share
I
anything?
think Hanuman sir wants to
I
share something. Sir, could you please unmute yourself and go ahead?
Yes, I unmuted just now. Thank you for the opportunity given here because since last 3 years, when working with the NGOs and we have converted here the barren land into the mini forest. So it has the ground level experience where the community building is going on. And along with that, where educational institute stands that in and around our workplace, there are 7 educational institutes, those who are taking initiatives, getting their groups on all important environment days. Let's take Earth Day is there, Environment Day just done, and next week it is coming one more. So from 1st July to 7th July it will be. And there are some people, those who are taking initiative like planting of 1 crore trees, people trees and the indigenous trees. That has been initiated. Since last 5 years, we have been working with climate action project, and last 3 years we have done it. So it's a platform where the students, as ma'am said before mine, that personalized effect, how our carbon footprint is adding into it, then how our water footprint is also available. So we should go with that and check it out. Data record has to be maintained because this can be added into our study as well. Another thing which will be added advantage for us is it is not something just the awareness will come through. Awareness is necessary, but after that awareness, action will speak more, and action will which will be long lasting and consistently perseverance will be giving the result.
We
Yeah,
will, Dishant, we'll just take one more response
sure.
from Dr. Mohit Kumar. Mohit sir, please unmute yourself. Request you to please keep it to about a minute or so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Responding to the question that you just asked, because of my training in remote sensing and GIS, mostly I use satellite data to communicate this climate change. For example, if you go through the newspaper also, you see most of these maps which are prepared using satellite data. So these are something which are very useful in communicating the impacts of climate change kind of information. And these are very attractive also. So this is just what I hope I have not taken much of your time.
No, thank you, sir. Actually, this reminds me of a very good point that you are making about app or using the GIS data, that students come from various backgrounds to study environmental science. They may be a computer science student, a political science student, not just a environmental science student. So everyone has something to learn and to contribute. And seeing a air quality index app or a GIS software, a student might be, interested in doing something similar, developing something similar to develop as a solution. So yes, uh, very helpful. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with others. I hope others are also making a note. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Next, we move to what Dr. Mohit, sorry, was Mohit, right? Shared with us. No, before Dr. Mohit, the point was made about climate action. Uh, so after we discussed this with students about the impacts of climate change, we would really like to come to a point where we would like to understand what action we are taking or what kind of action can be taken, because this evokes a lot of curiosity. What is to be done? What is to be done? And we should learn what must be understood about it first, what must be taught about this first, and then how do we teach that? So it is first important to define what we mean by climate change. I've given a SDG definition SDG 13 is about climate action. Talking about urgent action. Why is it urgent? Because a 2-degree warming will be catastrophic and conditions would become so extreme that people won't be able to adopt. Then it's about combating climate change. That is mitigation. Mitigation is when you reduce greenhouse gases by enhancing activities that remove these gases from the atmosphere or avoid activities that put these gases in the atmosphere. So that is mitigation, combating climate change. When you talk about combating the impacts of climate change, you talk about adaptation. How do we adjust, the process of adjusting to actual or expected climate effects? Uh, I've also mentioned a point here of tipping points, and I would like to say that the climate vocabulary is getting so rich, and a number of terms come up every day, and it's very important that the students keep learning about these things. So I'll keep telling about some of these points, reminding about some of these points. Here I have mentioned tipping points. What is tipping point can be explained to students. So rather than following a linear flow, there can be some trivia, some facts, some new anecdotes that can be shared that somebody learned new, some new terminology that somebody learned about climate action or the impacts of climate change that can be shared. So here I've also given a two distinction between what adaptation in human systems means versus what is natural system adaptation. We'll come to this more. But first, we come to the topic of mitigation. What efforts could be made under climate mitigation? What are the challenges in making those efforts? Uh, as I said, this is a dense graph that is put on your screen. It's from IPCC's sixth assessment cycle synthesis report. It basically represents the mitigation options in different sectors and what might be the impacts and costs associated with such action. So basically a cost benefit assessment. We look at some of these in sector specific slides, but I think for many people, the question of what must be done is a real one, and they want to learn what the solutions are. And so teaching mitigation options becomes important. Educators can take each sector and discuss the solution with students and discuss can I mean they can discuss these solutions in respect of what would suit their local requirements, what would suit India, how effective is the solution, what is the cost involved in the solution. So I think this is a perfectly interactive discussion based topic for students. This could be taken up in class. So taking a sector-wise approach of discussing the theme of climate mitigation, I've come to the first sector of energy. Energy contributes a lot to the GHG emission. There's a graph from our World in Data on the right-hand side that gives about 71% contribution from the energy sector to the problem of climate change. So indeed, energy is the first sector that we should discuss. The graph on the left shows that the leftmost pie chart, that 22% of our energy needs are today met by electricity, 63% by direct fossil fuel usage. And to be clear, that 22% of electricity also uses fossil fuels, and just 28% of the electricity was renewable in 2023. The pie chart next to it indicates that to limit temperatures to 1.5 degree centigrade, the 2050 scenario, what the energy mix in 2050 should look like, 91% of our energy needs should come from electricity. That is the pathway that we have decided. And out of that, 51% from renewable energy. So it is important to understand and to teach that when we talk about the energy sector, we discuss two things. One is we need electrification of a lot of our energy uses. Consider transport. We need to electrify transport. Second, also consider household cooking. In some ways, where household use biomass, wherever possible and affordable, we can shift to electric cooking. So that is electrification. And then there's another aspect, that is electricity itself comes from we need to ensure that electricity itself comes from clean sources. So these are the two-pronged approaches that have to be thought about in the energy sector. Then there's industry sector. While teaching climate, again, I stress that the whole vocabulary thing is a thing that has to be dealt with, and we should keep introducing them as and when required. Here I have included the scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. We often encounter this when we discuss industries. What is scope 1 emission? What is scope 2 emission? What is scope 3 emission? So basically, these are the categorization of the source from which the emission is coming for industries. So scope 1 emission can be the direct emission from an industry. Let's say a chemical industry is emitting, when it's producing certain chemical, it's emitting greenhouse gases. So that is a direct emission. Then there is scope 2 emission, the emission that comes from the energy that you use. For instance, you are using power, that power is coming from some other coal-based power plant. So that comes under scope 2 emissions. And then scope 3 emission is a large dimension of the emissions from your value chain. For instance, also how much emission happened because of the employees traveling daily to office. So these kinds of emissions can be grouped under scope 3. So, I mean, this is a concept that can be taught to students to know if they ever see a term like scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, they should know what these are. And then there are, again, sectoral responses to industry sector, energy efficiency, what is circularity, and how do we manage the demand and material efficiency of our resources? How do we do carbon management? This is a fairly advanced topic, and people like to talk about technology stuff, new stuff. So this could be a good point of discussion for students as well. Then we have a sector that is very near and dear to a lot of people and to me as well, the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector. On the right-hand side, there's a chart from the first slide on mitigation that I showed you, the actions. And here you can see there are two actions, reducing conversion of natural ecosystems. You can also say this is preventing ecosystem degradation, and that is different from afforestation. So rather than afforestation, preserving your present forest is a lot more effective option. The red indicates the cost, and you can see the darker color in the afforestation. It indicates it's a more costly option. So it's better to preserve what is there than to have a new sort of plantation afforestation drive. So I think these kinds of technical discussions would be helpful to take up in class on mitigation action. I very much believe that students always come up to me and ask, what should we do? What is the solution? And these are some of the solutions that are listed in IPCC report itself. So it's a very helpful guide to that. Then again, I also like to discuss the challenges. It's not just about solutions, but also because people often come up with what is the problem in scaling these solutions? If we have so many solutions, what is the problem? And sometimes the question is more direct. Why are things moving slowly? Well, part of the reason is that there are a number of challenges, and these challenges are technical, and I think they have to be taught to students as well. With every sector, there is certain challenge. Here I have highlighted the challenge of energy transition, that even though when you talk about renewable energy scaling up, we see that renewable energy has become cost effective. There is a lot of deployment of renewable energy. Even in India, the government is doing very well on keeping up its renewable energy target. At the same time, if you see the graph, you'll see that the fossil fuel based energy or the capacity of power is also increasing. So in itself, the renewable energy scale up does not mean anything for the climate if it is not complemented with something like fossil fuel phase down. So these nuances are also something that has to be understood. And this is another slide on the energy transition question, where I am I have shown that the disproportionate investment or the difference in investment in various regions of the world. Some of the countries have been receiving good investment for renewable energy, while others are lagging behind. So there are real financial challenges, there are infrastructure challenges, and then there is what is called a just transition. Yeah, sorry. Just transition is something. So uh, these kinds of challenges should also be discussed in classrooms because they are more nuanced, as I was saying, and not just a banal explanation of mere solutions. The just transition, for instance, how do we transition our energy systems without causing economic and social distress to people and systems dependent on fossil fuel-based industry? And also, how do we talk about regional disparity in renewable energy addition? We see that a lot of renewable energy is being added in states like Rajasthan, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu. But what about the eastern states? Is the same thing happening? So I think these are very good questions, local questions that people will engage with, and these should be discussed and understood as well. These are the broad challenges that I've listed for the whole sector. There are things to think about, that it's climate finance is an issue, uh, the impact on economy. For instance, we keep calling out Saudi Arabia that you are a petro state. You sell oil, so much emission because of you. It's true, but the problem is that crude oil and natural gas contribute to about 38.7% of Saudi Arabia's GDP. So it would impact its economy. So we have to think of ways of how such an economy could transition away from fossil fuels without having to disturb its population a lot. Then there's the question of political support. Earlier this year, there was farmer protest in Europe, and partly the reason for the protests were climate-related laws. So these kinds of nuances are also there. Then there's data availability, and what sort of technological availability we have is also a question that can be dealt in challenges to such mitigation solutions. Some of the resources I have shared. Uh, I like to follow the UNFCCC process. We also report on that. Recently, the Bonn Climate Change Conference took place, and it's an annual activity. It always takes place in Bonn, Germany, every year. It's a mid-year activity to COP, so a lot comes out of it as well. A lot comes out of COP as well. So students should learn. MAB teachers can discuss after these events have taken place what was discussed in these conferences. What were the key takeaways for the students that think about the process as well. Uh, you can go through media reportings on this. Then the UNFCCC website is also a good guide for it. Then the IPCC reports that come out in 2 years, 3 years is also an important resource to look into. I also follow Project Drawdown. It lists, I think the book lists about 100 solutions to climate change, and it gives various dimensions of how those challenges are costly or how those challenges would be effective, how much they would be effective, how much are they effective in terms of other solutions. So this is also a very good guide for students to refer to. Also the education on mitigation. Do you have any inputs on the flow or alternate ways in which this topic can be taken up? Yeah, one of the possible flows I told you, that you first take a sector-wise approach, take each sectors, what can be the solutions, what are the challenges with those solutions, and then maybe discuss comparatively those solutions. Yeah. Any inputs?
If any of you would like to respond to it, or suggest any alternative ways, please unmute yourself and give us your response. Somebody I remember was talking about representation from English literature. So, sir, ma'am, if you would like to speak now. All right, I think we can
Okay.
go on there.
Yeah, we can come back to this later. I mean, if somebody has any thought on this too. shared with us. Next, we come to adaptation. Adaptation involves basically adjusting practices, processes, and structures to minimize harms from climate impacts. It is very, very important to stress while understanding and teaching that adaptation is also very important. Uh, as much as the solutions to climate change in form of mitigation are, adaptation is also equally important, especially for developing countries which are vulnerable to it. India ranks in the top 10 countries which are vulnerable to climate change. Uh, Considering countries that contribute less to the problem of climate change, they have very little avenues to follow mitigation action, and they may be equally or more vulnerably or more vulnerable from other countries. So this demands that we also put in efforts to deal and discuss adaptation. Uh, Here I have given it's again a very busy graph. It's from IPCC. I directly put it here. It shows what sort of observed impacts on human systems are taking place because of climate change in different parts of the world. And if you can see, there are markers of very high impact, medium impact, low impact. So we have definite studies to indicate what is the observed impact on human systems, and still we know a lot less on these topics. Here I've given some examples of the approaches that can be discussed in natural systems and human facilitated natural adaptation. For like, how do you diversify your cropping systems? Water management, water harvesting. This can be a part of adaptation in human systems, so that when there is water scarcity, you are not impacted to that extent because of climate change induced water scarcity. Or health care planning. When heat waves are there, you'll see that the national heat action plan or the state heat action plans are more into adaptation techniques than in mitigation techniques. So I think pulling out those heat action plans, discussing them in class, what do students think about them, can be a useful tool to discuss how policymakers see adaptation measures in these kinds of cases. Here, then again, a very busy graph on the diverse feasible climate responses and adaptation options that exist to the key risks of climate change given by IPCC. One of the things that must be understood is that adaptation approaches are more localized than mitigation approaches, as Sir was mentioning before. So even though we would like to teach the possible approaches in classrooms, attempts must be made to identify what adaptation measures best suits your town, your city, your university campus, and it gives a sort of again the personalization aspect of it. And then I've thrown in some classroom activity ideas. You can give assignments to students on the local adaptation needs. Let them go find out what are the local in their area, what are the adaptation needs, what should be done, and you can discuss them in the class as well and how effective they are. There can be case study discussion. There are a lot of case studies on adaptation. These can be discussed as well. Field trips can be taken up, wetlands. You can visit green buildings. What are they doing to increase energy efficiency or deal with extreme heat events or extreme cold events? How are people pursuing water harvesting? Center for Science and Environment has a very good setup of water uh, management system, and we take pride in that as well. So yeah, those kinds of systems can be explored. There's a role-playing activity. In fact, UNFCCC has also utilized role-playing activity to discuss, for the negotiators to discuss some of these things. I remember last year the global stocktake process was taking place, and the negotiators were asked to do role-playing. They consider themselves as farmers, they consider themselves as city planners, sit in a group, assume their role, and then think what would be their what would be the adaptation solutions, or what would be the challenges that they feel there are. it could be a very effective technique to engage students. And then some students are also interested in design, infographic, illustration activities. So a poster design activity is also perfectly good. It is also done at UNFCCC level. So yeah, these are some activities not just limited to educational institutions, but to negotiation platforms as well. So very helpful. Then I think it is also important to highlight indigenous strategies. IPCC has very clearly stated that supporting indigenous self-determination is important. Supporting indigenous knowledge-based adaptation is important. You cannot just impose adaptation solutions on people, especially as I told you that adaptation solutions are mostly local. So there is a risk of maladaptation. I'll come to that in the next slide. Uh, so adaptation solutions, wherever possible, should be bottom up. And for indigenous people, tribal people, it's very relevant that their indigenous knowledge is utilized. I'll share my personal experience on this. I was working with Baga tribes on a certain project, and I was surprised to learn that they had more than 2 dozen types of seeds that they had in their own agriculture system, which were different, and they had classification for drought resistant crops. These are drought resistant crops. They knew it before this kind of knowledge is brought to them. So and there are studies on these kinds of things, but what is happening lately is that the Baga community uh, is moving towards monocropping, more dependent on rice. So this kind of indigenous knowledge is going away. So we also have to see how the knowledge sharing aspect, how the knowledge has to be preserved, how the knowledge sharing is to be done with students, how these kinds of examples from within India can be brought. There's a compendium of community and indigenous strategies for climate adaptation by Food and Agriculture Organization. I've shared the link here. There are very good examples in that report as well. Then again, the question of challenge here as well. There are challenges. The foremost challenge is inadequate finance. The adaptation gap report released by UNEP annually talks about it, and the adaptation gap report is a perfectly good resource to to share with classroom. Uh, it discusses a lot of things that are problematic. We don't have a rigid definition of adaptation, so there's no consensus on what should be considered adaptation and how that should be financed. If you see the graph, the stark reality of adaptation gap in finance that this report highlights and is understood, but there is very little movement on this, unfortunately, in political levels. So it exists as a great challenge. Then maladaptation. There are several news reports on maladaptation as well that study when a certain adaptation activity is taken up, but it has unintended consequences. It's basically maladaptation. So teaching students about these kinds of, again, terminologies and that is also very relevant uh, for adaptation. Some adaptation resources. We have media stories, documentary. There's a UNFCCC documentary on adaptation. The adaptation gap report, I cannot stress enough. It's a very good report that comes out yearly. It's an authoritative report that you can use. You can just go through the highlights and maybe discuss it the next day in the class. That's a very helpful technique. Then there are national adaptation plans that country put out. They submit it to the UNFCCC. So one of the activities that can be taken up is how can students go through the brief summary of national adaptation plans of different countries, and maybe this can be also discussed in classrooms, what different countries have planned as a part of their adaptation strategy. That was about the adaptation part, the mitigation part. While we teach about climate resilience, we must also follow what the world is doing about it. It's very important to follow that. Here you see there's a graph that gives out a number of international treaties on various subjects. One of the highlight treaties was the Montreal Protocol. It's called a success because, to an extent, we've been successful in phasing out ozone depleting substances. So that is called a success. And then we have the climate related convention, which was signed at Rio in 1992. Then the Kyoto Protocol, which basically divided the roles of developed and developing countries, what responsibilities developed countries have, how they can help developing countries, and all that. Then we had Paris Agreement in 2015, which gave birth to voluntary commitment, voluntary target setting by countries of what they want to do by a set in a set time period, what is called as the NDCs. And the first period for NDCs end in 2030. India itself has NDC which has some quantified targets. I'll touch on them in a bit. So yeah, international aspects, international cooperation aspects, these should also be taught to students, not just the science of climate change or the technological or science of mitigation or adaptation. The politics of climate change is important because what is happening at COP and why are things stagnant at COP? These are questions that I often get asked from media or people who are unaware of the process. A lot happens. It's a process that is based on consensus, and it's a unique kind of agreement where each party has to agree. That's a consensus. So even if one party disagrees with a certain decision that the parties have taken, then that decision cannot be adopted. So it's a very difficult process, but a lot moves, although very slowly. Two principles that are important in this setup are the principle of equity and CBDR, recognizing that the burdens are shared unequally between countries. If you see the graphical representation we have given, uh, there's a stark difference between the per capita emission of an Indian or a Chinese versus Ethiopian. uh, two Chinese people consume as much as eight Indian people or 102 Ethiopian people, and that is equivalent to about what American national consumes. So there's a stark difference between consumption levels, the emission levels. So naturally, the duties are also divided on two bases. So this gives birth to the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. The responsibility is common; it is shared by all, but it is differentiated. Why is it differentiated? First, some countries are historically more responsible for the climate change because of their emissions. Also, because some of the countries continue to have high consumption levels, so they are responsible. Secondly, they also have the capability because these are usually the rich countries. They also have the capability to deal with uh, climate change. So they have an active role to play in climate mitigation. And so, yes,
Sorry to interrupt you, but if we could wind up in the next few minutes because we're almost out of time.
yes. We'll just be finished
Yeah.
in 2 minutes. Yeah. So anyway, so this is about climate politics, and this is something that should also be brought up in classrooms. I'm sure some of the frameworks that India has is also discussed in classrooms by teachers in a very structured way. There are NDCs, then what is called NAPCCs, the National Action Plan, and the state action plans that were there, and some of the other elements. Every day something new comes up. This has to be discussed. Some students are interested in corporate sustainability. So I have this for them, teach them about what corporates are doing, what they can do about climate action, and what is good, what is problematic in that aspect. I have highlighted the greenwashing problem that has been coming up in recent years. How do they do accounting? What mitigation and adaptation means for them. So largely when we were discussing mitigation adaptation earlier, it was from the lens of nations. This is from the lens of businesses and industries. Then as a community, for communities, the mitigation, adaptation, climate action differs from a business or a nation. And here are some actions that I've listed. And the problems that they face are more localized, of course. The urban heat island effect that we see in urban areas, we need immediate solutions to them. So what solutions can we prioritize at a community level is a different thing. Then there are, of course, climate action that everybody wants to talk about, carbon footprint of each individual. But here it must be realized that many of these measures are more suited to people or countries with very high carbon footprint. So that might be more relevant for them. More relevant for vulnerable population will be adaptation methods. What sort of adaptation activities should be taken up for them? It's more relevant for those kinds of citizens. Lastly, I come to the point of role of education in climate change. I think the largest impact on climate action can be made through education. We can't put the cart before the horse. So the approach that I took today can be one of the approaches to teach climate action. You discuss mitigation, adaptation, the science of climate change, the solutions, the challenges. At the same time, the subject is so interdisciplinary that it touches on various themes, development issues. It's also not just about environment. And this has to be stressed to students that it's not just about environment. It's also about their daily life. It's also about development challenges, economic questions, technological questions, and so many opportunities to work for and understand. So it is as much relevant to a computer science student who may like to think how the theme of climate mitigation can be a part of his or her climate project, as much as it's relevant for a political science student. Before this, these are some of the resources for educators. There's WWF-based material on climate education. India's third national communication that it gives as a part of reporting mechanism to UNFCCC has a lot of detail on India, how much mitigation we have done, what are our needs, what are our development challenges, what are our adaptation needs. These kinds of things are listed in that. And then there's from US EPA on climate change, resources for educators. Yeah, with that, I would like to ask any classroom activities, resources, teaching methods that you use in your classrooms for teaching climate change that you would like to share with us, think is useful for teachers, or any other inputs.
If you have any questions as well, we can take them in this slot. I think there was one question, Dushant, from Sarveshwar Sahu sir. He was asking about climate deniers. There are a lot of people who deny that climate change is the real thing. So how do we handle them?
Well, sir, thank you for asking that question. That's why I put it in right in the first slide that at the outset, whenever you are discussing climate change with the classroom, make it very clear that here is the science of it. There are thousands of scientists who sit, do research, and those research are collated and put in the IPCC reports. So I think people will believe that there's a science around it. And when they go into the detail of topics, when they go into the detail of these reports, they will understand that for each point, IPCC or any other research person lists what is the chances of climate change having an effect on this. So that's why I discussed attribution science as well. So I think those have to be countered for students to have no doubt about these things. The personalization experience and the science has to be the first thing when such a course is started. So I guess that's it.
All right. Thank you, Dushant. Do we have anybody else who would like to share any particular activity, any particular resource they use, any particular methodology that has proven efficient?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
audible. Sir.
I
Please.
would just like to add one simple activity that we followed in our classroom. That was reading of a book called Cradle to Cradle. I think that's a very wonderful book which we made the students to read, which in itself explained the basic theories or the way to follow basically.
Thank you.
Suraj sir, you were
Okay,
saying.
yeah. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, actually, we started actually, I'm from Digital University, Kerala. So we have a program, MSc in Ecology with specialization Ecology Informatics. So as per our curriculum, we have a credits for, it's called activity credits. Student have to take some activity for acquiring credit. So we started a campaign, something like it's called Quit One Challenge. Actually, student run that campaigning. So within the university. So the idea is anybody from this institution can take some pledge. So they can quit any one of their unsustainable kind of lifestyle. Actually, it's a part of UN program life. That means lifestyle change for environment. Actually, we successfully conducted this program and we got a good response for this event. And actually we are planning to with the student support we are planning to expand this concept within primarily within the Kerala context. That's one of the activity we conducted already.
That's a very creative activity. Thank you. I hope others are also making a note of this activity. Any other points?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, am I
Yes,
audible?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes,
Shraddha,
ma'am.
you're audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I am a professor at Institute of Architecture and Planning, Nirma University. I am an architect and a master's in landscape architecture. So while teaching certain courses related to environment, climate, landscape, etc., we take up a course of green building design, and therein we try giving lot of activities, wherein one activity is say poster making competition, which is kind of a competition that is run in the class, and then the winners, their posters would be kind of communicated, and there is a prize also. It would be pasted in the walls of all the institutes, so that it gives lot of motivation to students कि मैंने ये बनाया है और मेरा poster is going to be put on the walls of all the institutes. And then we also try propagating making calendars as an educational calendar related to sustainable development goals, etc. So that is also going on very well, and I would really want all the institutes to take up this activity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. That's very helpful and good. I mean, I totally agree with both the points.
All right. I think we are out of time. We would definitely like to hear more examples of activities and ideas. You can definitely write to us, and we can try to put together all the resources and share them with you. So thank you so much, Tushant, for the wonderful session. And I'm sure Tushant session also gave you an idea of how the entire topic can be taken up in the classroom in terms of the flow, because he first talked about the basics, the definitions, and after that, he moved on to the specifics and a lot of activities, lot of interactive resources. So I'm sure that really helped. Now, before we close, I do have a special announcement for all the Gen members here. If you've not registered yet for the network, we have put the registration link in the chat box. You can register there. Moreover, as I said earlier, we also have a monthly newsletter that you can contribute to as a Gen member. If you're interested, please subscribe to the newsletter, and then you can write to us that you're interested in contributing, and we can take the discussion further. Finally, for all the Gen members, we are launching a very special program that had been asked for quite some time now. It's the Gen Internship Project, and we have very few slots. So you will all receive, if you're registered with the network, all of you will receive an email in your inbox tomorrow regarding the details of the program. Gen members can nominate any one student from their institution to intern with CSE, and we have limited slots. We are expecting the interns to commit at least 6 weeks with us, so that they can have a longer engagement and they can gain some productive insights. There's a Google form, the link for which will also be shared with you with the announcement. Kindly note that students cannot apply for this internship. It is only open to Gen members, and Gen members only can nominate their students. If you have any further questions about the internship, you can write to us. We'll share the email ID in the chat box. And kindly do remember that we have very limited slots. So therefore, the internships will be offered on a first come, first serve basis. So we will start accepting nominations tomorrow. And the last date would be 1st of July. So we hope that we'll get a great response from you for this initiative as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And those of you who are interested in the upcoming sessions in the series, please do keep an eye on the CSE website. We will we'll keep updating it regularly, and we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming sessions as well. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Mhm.